So I'm going to keep this video as authentic and raw as possible because honestly, I think it needs it. So no crazy edits or anything like that. I think loneliness and social isolation are some of the biggest problems in the modern day world. I think that if you're watching this video right now, you're probably experiencing either loneliness or some isolation or something like that. I think that a lot of people are. I know I certainly have been through really dark periods where I've been so lonely. I was pretty much so lonely throughout the whole of my teens. I remember, sometimes I would genuinely think to myself that if I disappeared off the face of the earth, would anyone actually care? Would anyone even notice? And, some of the few acquaintances I did have when, I was younger, I wouldn't feel connected to them. I'd feel almost like a bit of an imposter. I'd feel, nervous really speaking up and things like that. And, that situation did ultimately improve. I turned myself into an incredibly social person. But I think as time went on, I've had the dips again where, I've experienced tremendous loneliness. And I remember when the whole world shut down, when, the pandemic was going on, I remember thinking to myself and honestly realizing that I didn't really have anyone particularly close to me other than my fiance. And I just used to think like, does anyone actually care? I would go through stages of checking my phone and, nobody had messaged me in like weeks and weeks. And I think that's very, very different because as a guy, we're very logical, right? And sometimes when we get a feeling, we just think to ourselves, you know what, it's just a feeling. It's not something that's really real. But when you see like actual evidence that no one gives a damn, right? Who people aren't messaging you, texting you, and the only way that they actually text is if you text them first and initiate the conversation. And even then, you feel like a little bit of a burden. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, I've really done something wrong here. Like, I've been so focused on my goals, building a business, that I've completely neglected like the social side of my life. And I've almost like forgotten how to connect with people. And it was like the weirdest thing. Honestly, it made me feel like a bit of a failure just because I was like, we're humans, we're social animals. I should know how to connect with people. But then I started to see statistics, right? Get a load of some of these statistics. In the US, about half of adults reported measurable feelings of loneliness even before the pandemic. Globally, a recent survey found that 33% of adults experience loneliness, so 1 out of 3 people. This is the huge one, right? Loneliness is associated with a myriad of health risks. It's twice as harmful to our physical and mental health as obesity. Loneliness is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of the impact of on mortality, making it even more dangerous than obesity. That is insane. And I honestly just don't see anyone talking about it. I don't see any of the news reporting on it, considering I would say this is, if it's affecting 1 out of 3 people, people have forgot, like they've just unlearned how to really connect with each other in what's supposed to be the most connected world we've ever lived in with all social media and things like this. And it's kind of crazy how we've come to this situation. And one of the biggest learning lessons for me was that as a guy, everything is my responsibility. And I try and put that weight on my shoulders, and it almost gives a bit of relief to the current situation. When I was feeling incredibly lonely through some of those really dark stages, I'd put that feeling on my shoulders and say, well, look, Rob, this is your fault. This is your responsibility. How can you take care of it? And my fiance would sometimes turn around to me and be like, no, like, if you've invited a bunch of people out and no one's turned up, that's not your fault. But what she doesn't understand, and what I've explained to her, is that although that's great to try and make me feel better, I need that problem to solve. And if I put that responsibility on something external, then I can't solve that problem because it's not within my control anymore. So I have to have a really strong internal locus of control. I need to have, like, everything is my responsibility. There's a great book on this called, it's by Jocko Willink, and it's called Extreme Ownership, and he's a Navy SEAL. It's a great book, and he talks about how every situation that happens, he interprets it as his responsibility, as his fault, because it was his ownership, and only then it allows him to take further action. So I highly recommend you read that. But through that kind of thinking, the problem is with being a guy, I'll start that sentence again, right? The problem is with being a guy is that, unfortunately, if you're unhappy with something, or there's an aspect of your life that's not going very well, it's just not going to change on its own, right? It's just not. It's highly unlikely. You have to be the person who's changing yourself. You have to be the person who's taking the action, because nobody's going to do it for you. It's one of the harsh realities of being a guy. So if you're feeling incredibly lonely and isolated, you've got to think to yourself, well, where did this go wrong? Let's break this down. Has this always been the case? I'm in a bit of a unique situation because I'm actually incredibly extroverted. But then I think to myself, if things like this happen to me when I'm incredibly extroverted, which is a natural advantage, no wonder it happens to lots of other people, right? And I think that, I moved to, when I was younger, I at first got the loneliness because I went to, a school with a lot of other people, and I kind of fell out with the friend group that I had at the time. And then from there, I went to a different college, which some people from that school went to, but not many people. My best friend went to somewhere completely different. And, the friend groups just split up. And the people who I see who've got very, very strong friend groups in this day and age, they've stuck with each other for years. They've been childhood friends. And that's what makes them such good friendships. So if you're like me and you don't have something like that, then you can't just think, well, these other people have, these strong relationships. It's so unfair. It's so unfair. You have to think, well, how can I be building up relationships? So first of all, you need to do an audit of your life and think, what have I done wrong here? What's the situation? What's the battlefield like, right? Like a commander, like a general. What's the battlefield like? What part of this stuff do I have control over? Well, you have control over a ton of stuff, right? Now you know these things. How can you get connected with more people? Look at your environment. How are you spending your day to day? I truly think, even though remote working was something I always wanted to do, when we all got sent home for those few years and everyone started working from home, I truly think it was one of the worst things which could have happened, even though it seemed to be a great thing at the time. And the reason why is because people just got really comfortable being isolated in their own space. And if you look back years and years ago to our ancestors, we grew up in tribes of 150 people, and we're incredibly social animals, and we need other people to be around other people. It's what we do. And now we're seeing some of the worst statistics ever reported on loneliness, worst statistics ever reported on male, self-deletion, right? And a lot of it just comes from that we can't, it's hard to connect with people. So if you're looking at your environment and you're thinking to yourself, am I actually in an environment which supports my social goals? The answer is probably no. And I did this myself. I ended up writing down on a piece of paper, everything that I was doing. How often was I going to the gym? Well, I was going to the gym at 5 a.m. when no one was there because I was prioritizing getting the workout in. How often was I connecting with people after work, right? Well, I wasn't really connecting with too many people. I wasn't even dropping anybody a text or a message or anything like this because I was working on a business at the same time. I was chasing some business goals, right? How often, while I was actually in work, was I actually connecting with people and speaking with people there? Well, not very often, because I was in a highly pressured job that was not supportive to meeting other people. The targets were incredibly high, so I couldn't really take a break between throughout the day to actually go and speak to other people, because on my team they were under the same pressures as I was. And also, I was working remotely as well, so I wasn't in a social environment, and it's very, very hard to actually connect with people if you don't just have that, over the desk few casual comments. Now you need to actually send a message to people, and they need to take the time to send one back. It's not natural, right? And so when you put all these things together, I found that I was like, whoa, no wonder I'm feeling incredibly lonely, because I have almost been poison dripped into this lifestyle, which is just not supportive at all to my social goals, right? And as soon as I had a starting point like that, it was amazing, because then I could be like, well, what can we adjust? Can I go to the gym later in the day? Yeah, it's gonna be more difficult, but I'm gonna see other people and interact with them. Can I go back to the office or get a different job, which means I'm gonna be around others? Yeah, of course I am. Can I schedule an hour in the evenings to just catching up and trying to rekindle relationships and friends with, the people who I've kind of faded out of contact with over the years? Of course I can. Can I do some sort of sport which helps with, team building, bravado, collaboration, right? Of course I can. I started going to Muay Thai, which is a sport I used to do a long time ago, right? And just making these little tiny changes, it really, really encouraged me to basically get myself out there, and also it helped me connect with different people as well. And those feelings of loneliness, you're in way more control of it than you actually think you are. And then it brings me on to part two, right? Because one of the biggest problems with, being so lonely is that, and being so isolated, or whether you've got social anxiety or something like that, is that it's hard to meet other people if you haven't got the experience with people, right? It's kind of like, when you apply for a job and it's a job you don't have experience in, and you can't get experience because they're telling you need experience to work in the job, which is entry level, which shouldn't need experience too, but it's the chicken and the egg, right? It's hard to make friends with other people once, if you've, got no friends, or because you don't even go out, right? You don't go out with your friend group. And not only this, it gets even more difficult because your ability to communicate, it dips down tremendously, because you are, speaking, and you can't, it's like your brain and your mouth, they're just not connected. What you're thinking is not really coming out of your mouth, because you're just so not used to interacting with different people for such long periods of time. So then it makes it even harder to meet with people, and it kind of like snowballs, right? So if you're in that situation and you're really at ground zero there, and I've, definitely been there a few times, a great way is to start practicing your ability to communicate. So I'm sat down in this video right here, and it's late at night, so I'm not giving my best impression of how to communicate properly, but I'm sat down in front of this video. I've got no notes around, no prompts or anything like that. I'm just literally talking about what's coming to my head, and I know that I'm talking roughly on a topic, right? And to be honest with you, I haven't really said or other little brain fart things too much. And the reason why is because I have spoke on video before, and when you speak on video, it allows you to articulate your thoughts in a specific way. So if you are meeting people, or going into more of a social environment, and you haven't had any practice, the sword is very, very blunt, and your social skills are pretty much non-existent. I know this because I also run a business, and occasionally I'll be so busy that I will have like not much social interaction other than, with my girlfriend. And what happens is when I do interact with people, or, I organize some sort of event and, meet with friends and things like this, I end up like not being able to speak properly to them. I'll be like hesitating if we're having a group conversation of what I want to say, right? And like the moment will pass of me speaking, right? I'll be like waiting patiently for my turn to speak. I will, then when I do speak, I won't be able to quite say the sentence properly, and I'll worry that it'll make me look stupid and things like this. And it's so funny, because even though I've done tons and tons of work on like the social side of me over the years, from like being incredibly lonely to building up quite a good social circle, you know, to then being lonely again, to then really working on my social skills, to then doing public speaking and things like this. I've realized that the sword gets blunt very fast. And if you do not practice and keep yourself oiled, right, you're not going to be able to communicate properly. So what I would recommend you do, everyone's got a phone, everyone's got a camera. If you don't have it, you could just speak at the wall, but film yourself on a camera and just freestyle whatever comes into your head. Tell the camera what's happened in your day. Tell the camera, you know, and then do like a few different takes, watch it back, and you'll see that you'll hardly be able to get your words out and you won't be able to speak fluently at all. If you do that a few times, it might take you 10 times, it might take you 20 times. You will notice that after a while, it's almost like, you know, think of a stiff joint when you've just got out of bed in the morning, right? Or you've just had like a workout or something like that. You will be able to kind of move about a little bit more. You'll be able to be a bit more socially fluid. And you just do that day after day after day. Just practice, dedicate 30 minutes set aside to just talking about your day, talking about what's going on. And you'll find that connection between like your brain and your mouth actually improves, right? It's actually starting to work as it should do. It's just that you've been so isolated and away from social environments for so long that it's kind of lost its touch a little bit. So just try that. If you haven't got a camera phone or anything like that, which would be pretty crazy in this day and age, to be honest with you, but just stare at a wall, just talk to the wall, or look in a mirror and talk to yourself. Maintain eye contact with yourself. These are just very, very simple things, but they make honestly a lot of effort, because then when you go out and actually speak to people, or, you know, further down the line, you've got some good friends, you've got, you know, good friend groups, and you'll be able to actually say exactly what you mean to them. And that's something that's really, really huge that people just forget about, okay? So that's part 2, is staying socially fluid. Part 3 is actually getting people interested in you. So the best way to make a person interested in you and to build rapport is, ironically, not talk about yourself really at all, is just to talk about them. The rapport is built when you talk about them. The interest in you increases when you are interested in them. And the reason why is people love talking about themselves. You could sit in a conversation with a person who's not very social, right? And get them to talk for hours if you just talk about them. Oh, so what is it you do? Oh, how come we decided to do that? Oh, really? So what about that, you know, made you do that? Oh, really? So I used to do blah, 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 blah. And, you know, I found that, etc. happened. What did you think about that? Oh, wow. So I never used to know that you knew that person, right? Just about them, just genuine conversation. That is that is literally the best way to make people interested in you. And it works with the opposite sex. You know, if you're going to date someone as well, they've done studies with the opposite sex, actually, you know, male and female relationships, and they found that the least successful dates is where the guy is constantly saying me, 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 but the most successful dates is when the woman says I on average 7 times, right? So she is predominantly talking about her and her experiences, and she views that as a better date, right? So just be genuinely interested in the other person. So I'm hoping this channel, it doesn't actually have any subscribers at the moment, but I'm hoping that some of these videos will help some people out there in the future and kind of combats against this loneliness, this depression people are facing, this isolation as well, this having no friends, crazy time which a lot of people are experiencing. I'm hoping these tips, these topics are genuinely helping people out there. Let me know in the comments if you like this video. Also as well, introduce yourself in the comments. Practice interacting in the comments straight away. That is an action step for you. So go to the comments and just say who you are, what is it you do. I'll come and interact with you as well. We'll get other people to interact with you. All right. So take care. See you in the next video.